Case 2. YouTube's Most Mysterious Vlogger by Jacob Mielke. This is not a joke. Please help. That was the subject line of the very first email my investigative service received. I have it saved to this day. In a way, that case shaped the years to come. It cemented that we weren't just going to be having walkthroughs of haunted houses and going Bigfoot hunting in the woods. There would be times when things became serious. I started Mielke Investigations with my friend Moxie in the summer of 2015. I was and still am a horror writer, and I wanted to work more with non-fiction. Being an actual paranormal investigator allowed me to do that by enabling me to write about my own experiences. Moxie, a fan of my work who eventually became a friend, came up with the idea. After a terrifying first case, where we investigated supernatural activity in a strip club, I decided to make it official and had business cards printed for the newly minted Mielke Investigations. Moxie had taken to distributing them to people who might be able to throw a case our way. Lo and behold, someone noticed. From omitted email address at AOL.com to omitted email address at AOL.com. Subject: This is not a joke, please help. Hello. I found your card at a bus stop today, and I hope you can help me. Do you know who Operike is? He was a YouTuber I like to watch. His channel was deleted last year. I know you only focus on ghosts and aliens and stuff, so hear me out. My mom was having nightmares, and one day she saw his picture on my computer and said, "That's him. That's the man in my dreams." The scary thing is, I was having nightmares too. I'd be running through a maze and he would follow me. I'd run and he would walk, but somehow he was always right behind me. My mum used to have nightmares where she'd be at a pool watching me drown. Operike was the lifeguard, and he'd never even tried to save me. My mum doesn't have those nightmares anymore, but I still do sometimes. I know it's not much to go on, but maybe you could look into it a little. Every time I think about him now I get scared. And my mum didn't even watch him. How is she having nightmares about him? Am I just overthinking things and being a baby here? Please help. Amy. Name omitted. She was right. It wasn't much to go on. Still, she was our only client. Ha! As if we were getting paid. At the moment. So I opened a new file on my computer. Case 2. I wasn't able to find too much that night on account of the channel being deleted before it could really take off. What information I had came from forum posts and the like. The YouTuber called Operike had a channel in 2013 to 2014 of minor success. His real name was Scott, though no one seemed to know his surname. He posted vlogs talking mostly about his life and thoughts. I was able to find a single screenshot of one of his videos off Google image search, showing a video of about 15 minutes in length and around 5,000 views. Operike was gesturing at the camera, his mouth open in mid-speech. He looked normal to me, with his short brown hair, brown eyes, and thick-rimmed glasses. His face was as smooth as the day he was born, and his shirt was a red sweater. And yet, as I studied him, I started to feel most curious. There was something slightly off about his features, as if they weren't sitting right on his face, and the difference was minuscule enough that our minds weren't registering it on a conscious level. Though he was smiling, his eyes looked pained, maybe? I decided to pursue it further, and wrote a quick email back to the client saying I'd look into it. The next day I met up with Moxie for coffee, and broached the subject of Operike. I told her about the client's nightmares, what little information I'd been able to find, and I showed her the screenshot of him on my phone. "Cool," she said. "I've never heard of him, but I'll see what I can find out. A couple of days later, she emailed me a link and instructions on how to view it. I had to download a browser called Tor and change a bunch of my settings. After 2 hours of frustration, I followed the link to a hidden video sharing site, which I'm pretty sure gave my computer digital syphilis. The post was an upright video entitled My Last. I moved my mouse cursor over the play button, but before I could click it, footsteps ran at me from behind. I whipped around in my chair, hands up to defend myself, but there was no one in the room. I chalked it up to the upstairs neighbours running through their apartment, a perfectly normal thing to do at 1 in the morning, and turned my attentions back to the video. The picture quality was normal, but the audio was distorted all to hell. Someone, either the person who posted it on this website of questionable legality, or Operaik himself, put subtitles in the video, so I was able to follow along. It started normally enough. Operaik recounted the events of his day. He mowed his lawn and got a package from Amazon, and some of his socio-political views. He seemed to be a big fan of Mitt Romney and George Takei. Towards the end of the video, something finally caught my interest. So, I have something to tell you guys. You're not going to want to hear it, but this has been a long time coming. For reasons I can't disclose, I'm shutting down my YouTube channel. He smiled at the camera then, and I couldn't help but flinch. There was something sleazy about that smile. It was the kind of grin I imagine a heroin dealer would give to a pregnant mother right before selling her his product. For my closing thoughts, I want to talk about secrets. We all have them. Anyone who says they don't is a liar. Most secrets are harmless. They're the secrets of the kid who stole the cookie, or the husband who slept with his wife's sister on their wedding night. But there are other secrets. Secrets with power. Secrets that haunt whoever learns them. He leaned in close to the camera, so his face took up the entire screen. His features were hideous, and I couldn't imagine how I ever thought otherwise. Some of you know what I mean. Some of you know my secret. The video ended there, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. On the surface, there was nothing about this video that made it worth looking into for a paranormal investigator, even if it was creepy. But on the other hand, Operaik gave me a strange feeling. I'd felt this before, many times stronger then, in the basement of the strip club Moxie and I investigated. I don't claim to be a psychic or anything, but I don't know. Maybe having experienced what I did gave me a sixth sense for these things. I downloaded the video and saved it to my Case 2 folder, praying the entire time that it wouldn't mess up my computer. That night, whilst I slept, I dreamt I was in a grocery store. The fruit and vegetables were rotten and had attracted flies and wasps. The deli display was filled with decaying meat and fish. Untold thousands of maggots writhed in the display. I went to the manager's office to complain about the conditions, and the fact there were no other employees on duty, but it was empty. I was alone in the store. A calendar on the wall of the manager's office was open to July of 2013. The 11th day was circled. Do you want to know my secrets? The voice behind me was as distorted as it was in the video. The only reason I understood the words were because they weren't just behind me. They were inside me. A hand fell on my shoulder, and an electric cold spread from the point of contact to the rest of my body. I opened my eyes and watched a spider scurry across the ceiling. It paused briefly as if it knew I was watching, then continued on its way. The first traces of light glowed blue through the window, not yet enough to illuminate the room. In the dark, a voice whispered next to my ear, not distorted at all this time. Do you want to know my secret? Yes, Operaik, I really do. It took nearly a week of asking questions on forums and in YouTube comment sections before I made the next breakthrough. July 11th, 2013. That was the day Operaik uploaded his first video to YouTube. I had no way of knowing that date the previous week, and yet it and the man it relates to appeared in my dream. It was the final shred of proof I needed to confirm something supernatural was going on. Could I have thought of a rational explanation given time? Probably, if I relied way too much on assumptions and coincidence. I asked Moxie to see if anything significant or strange happened on that date, since I'd reached the extent of my researching abilities. She assured me that she knew a guy who knew a guy, and he must have been a good guy, because I had my answer the very next day. Moxie forwarded an email to me with an old article attached to it. On July 11th, 2013, in the small town of Marietta, Ohio, a 24-year-old college student named Scott Eric Cranston was murdered in his house while his parents were on a date. His throat had been slashed while he sat at his computer recording a video. His senior picture was in the article. It was a good picture. The unsettling, creepy features I saw in his video were absent in the picture. Operaik was murdered the same day he recorded and uploaded his first YouTube video. Then he continued to make and upload more for 2 years after his death. It wasn't the first time I'd heard of ghosts continuing to do after death what they would have in life. Many a tale has been told of deceased old ladies tending to their gardens even in death, or the spirits of dead parents watching and protecting their still living children. But it was the first time I'd heard of a ghost vlogging. The internet has affected our world in such a huge way. I suppose it was only a matter of time before it affected the supernatural world as well. I emailed my findings to the client, who I never heard from again. There were ways I could keep investigating and gathering data, but my curiosity was sated for the time being. I saved all of my data in the Case 2 folder and decided to deem it closed. I thought there was nothing more we could learn. I thought I knew Operaik's secret. I thought wrong. Case 2 will continue in an update. For the first 2 days, Moxie didn't answer my texts. Unusual for her, because she is very much a phone-in-hand kind of gal, but I let it go. Everyone needs space sometimes, right? On the 3rd day she didn't show for our coffee date. I tried calling her phone. A recorded message told me the number was disconnected. Then I began to worry. On day 7, after spending every minute I could at a favourite hangout in hopes of seeing her, I decided something was definitely wrong. I went to the police station to file a missing persons report and ended up making a fool of myself. We'd only known each other for about a month and a half, and I'd yet to learn her address, or any of her family's names, or even her last name. All I had was a defunct phone number, first name, Molly, which she hated, hence why she went by Moxie, and description. I hoped that would be enough, as Moxie's red hair and distinctive tattoos, of things like Pokemon and Linda Blair's face, stood out in a crowd, but apparently not. Without more information, there was nothing the police could do, though the sergeant promised to keep an eye out for her. It didn't matter anyway, because I realised that night this was something the police couldn't solve. They dealt in the material, and their monsters were flesh and blood villains who followed the strict rules of the physical world. My monsters were more unpredictable. I've never been the type to pay attention to dates unless I needed to, and when I got home that day, I looked at a calendar for the first time in about a week. Then it clicked. The day Moxie stopped texting me was July 11th, 2015, the anniversary of Scott Eric Cranston's murder, and we'd wrapped up the case of Operaik, the ghostly YouTuber, the week before, or so I thought. It was a hell of a coincidence. I was rapidly losing my belief in coincidences. I did fret at first that maybe I was wasting time chasing a supernatural explanation, but what else could I do? Though I called myself an investigator, I wasn't trained in any way. If the cops couldn't find her, how could I? But I was the only one who could put the supernatural clues together, and I had to do something. Even if Mox's disappearance turned out to be a horror more suited to the world of police and sex traffickers and psychotic murderers. The first step was to comb through the data we'd collected and see if there was anything relevant. It was a long shot, but thoroughness is a virtue. I made a to-do list on a sheet of paper. Yes, I know that's ridiculous given the context. I have mild ADD and a physical list helps keep me focused. And at the top I wrote the name of Operaik's hometown. Maybe I could find his address or family. Next I opened the copy of Operaik's last video to see if he had mentioned anything that could lead me. I'm not ashamed to admit revisiting the video filled me with dread. The last time I watched it, I had disturbing nightmares that turned out to have real-world implications. And that was before I knew I was watching and listening to a dead man speak. I played the video, but something was wrong. The image distorted, breaking Operaik's face into dozens of different coloured lines on the screen. The audio was completely shot as well, just sounds and tones. I was about to click away when I heard a more discernible voice. It was quiet, but it clearly wasn't Operaik's. I rewound that part again and again at maximum volume, trying to make it out. How did? Where? You and I? Help me. Me, please. Jacob. It was a woman's voice. With the distortion, I couldn't be 100% sure it was Moxie. But come on, it was Moxie. I think anyone would have known the same in my shoes. I didn't know how, but there wasn't a shadow of doubt in my mind that Operaik was responsible for Mox's disappearance. What baffled me was the sheer scale of the act. As a rule, ghosts are mostly harmless. They can barely work up the energy needed to open a door. For one to kidnap Moxie, even if it had somehow been in her exact location when it happened, defied reason. Of course, that led to a possibility I really didn't want to consider. Maybe Operaik wasn't a ghost at all. It wasn't difficult to track down Operaik's next of kin. There weren't many people living in Marietta, Ohio, with the surname Cranston, and I tracked down the Facebook profile of Melinda Cranston, Operaik's mother, within minutes. She didn't post much. Most of what I saw on her timeline were memorial posts for her deceased son and husband. How horrible for her to lose her son and husband in so short a time, and the occasional shared pie recipe. She wasn't very cautious with her personal information. Her About Me section contained her address and phone number amongst other things. I called her number and she answered on the first ring, which wasn't nearly enough time for me to overcome my social anxiety.
Hello?
Her voice was raspy, and I hazarded a guess that she was at least a 2-pack-a-day smoker. That or she had laryngitis. Hello, Miss Cranston. My name is Jacob Mielke. I'm an author and I'm researching your son for an article I'm writing. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind answering a few questions. There was silence on the other end of the line. I always thought the call dropped before Miss Cranston angrily retorted.
My son's tragedy is not some piece of gossip for you vultures to jump on. He isn't a gimmick, or an urban legend, or a true crime story. He was a person. Can't his memory gain any goddamn respect?
I'm sorry, Miss Cranston. I didn't mean any disrespect.
This is the real world. What you mean doesn't actually mean shit.
Please, this is important. Someone's life is at stake and I think your son may be involved.
I'm hanging up.
Please, I want to know your son's secret. I don't know why I blurted that out. It was an even more inappropriate thing to say to a grieving mother than the rest of the conversation, which was poorly handled in hindsight. But it worked. Miss Cranston was silent for several moments, and when she spoke again, the anger was gone from her voice.
Why did you say that?
Things started to piece together in my head. I think you know why. You've heard your son say it before, haven't you?
That thing is not my son.
I know. I think it took my friend. I need to know more about it. Maybe if I figure out what it is, I can stop it. Maybe I can get it back.
I'll tell you everything I know. Do you know where I live? You have to come here. There's things you need to see.
She refused to give further information than that over the phone, so there was no choice. I bought a Greyhound bus ticket, which wiped out my savings due to the short notice, for the next day. I called off work and told everyone I was going on a fishing trip. It was a tense journey, and the longest part of it, Chicago, Illinois to Cleveland, Ohio, was spent in the company of a young man who didn't believe in sharing more than twice a month, and had spent the entire previous night at a rave. And if I had to wager a guess, I'd say they raved in a sauna. I had to hike part of the way to the Cranston house once I'd exhausted every possible public transportation option. When I got there, I found the door had been marked off with police tape. I spotted a man walking his dog on the road and asked what happened. Oh, Melinda Cranston had a heart attack. She called 911, and when the ambulance got there, she was already dead. Damn shame. She was a great lady. Miss Cranston was getting on in her years. It wasn't unusual for a woman her age to suffer a cardiac arrest. As for the timing, well, coincidence? You know, that circumstance that I was sure didn't actually exist. Someone knocked on my motel room door later that night. There was no one there when I answered, but a book was left in the hallway. It was bound in purple faux leather, and the first page identified it as Melinda Cranston's diary. Someone had scrawled on the page, "Do you want to know my secret?" Some of the pages were marked with post-it notes. I turned to the first one. December 20th, 2012. One day until the end of the world, apparently. I'm so glad Scott doesn't believe that nonsense. He still insists something major is going to happen, but at least he's not throwing away his savings or anything foolish like that. Misty from down the street said. I skimmed through the rest of the entry, which read like a love letter to a neighbour from a closet lesbian. Interesting, but not what I needed. I turned to the next posted page. December 21st, 2012. The world didn't end. What a surprise. Not a thing happened. Though Scott doesn't seem to think so. He says that on days like this one, different worlds are closer together, and sometimes things can come through. Like Halloween, I guess. I don't know. He's watching too many weird movies or something. February 3rd, 2013. I thought Scott let his little fantasies go. He didn't talk about them at all last month, but today he said he found a place where something came through. Apparently he was in Noonan Park walking the trails earlier, and he found some creepy stone house or something. I swear, I don't know how his mind works. There was something in the room with me. Call it my sixth sense or whatever, but I could tell I wasn't alone. It came with the diary. I was sure of it. March 13th, 2013. I'm so worried about Scott. He doesn't talk, he barely eats, he just stays in his room all day. Lately he's been talking about doing all the things he always wanted to do, like skydiving, or starting that video channel of his. Should I talk to a doctor about this? I'm so scared my baby's gonna take his own life. I don't know what I'd do if that happened. May 20th, 2013. There was someone in Scott's room last night. I woke up and needed to pee, and while I was walking down the hall I heard him crying. Someone was talking to him. They asked if he wanted to know a secret. That was the last entry in the diary. It was enough to piece together a rough estimation of what happened. Scott had a fixation with finding entities from other dimensions, and believed something would happen on December 21st, 2012, that would allow those entities passage to our dimension. He also believed he tracked down a location where one of those entities crossed over, a house in a park. Smart money was on him being correct in his theory, only the entity he found followed him back. From the sound of it, it was malevolent enough and strong enough to kill him, and perhaps others, like Miss Cranston. There were still things I didn't understand. Like, why did the entity carry on Scott's dream of having a YouTube channel? And why was it leading me to the house in the park? It was clear to me by now this was the case. If it wanted to kill me or teach me its secret, why the convoluted plan? It was strong enough to kill a human being and abduct another. I refuse to believe she's dead. Her absence didn't make sense unless she was alive. Couldn't it just come to me? I looked up directions to Noonan Park. It was about 10 miles away from the hotel, easily reachable on foot. I'd follow the trails and find the house. Whatever came next, I'd deal with it, and hopefully at the end of the tunnel, I'd find Moxie, alive and safe. Update for Part 3. Noonan Park was small, not much more than 150 acres. The parking lot adjacent to it was empty, perhaps because it was so early in the morning. Looking at it from the outside, not to mention the maps I'd studied before arriving, it didn't seem like there could be a house in there. Not a secret one anyway, and it had to be secret if it was built in a state park. I was hesitant to go in. All through the night and morning I kept turning the case over in my head, trying to find an alternative to the conclusion I kept arriving at. I was being led by something that wanted me here, for reasons unknown. My presence was expected. It should have been easy to avoid the trap. All I had to do was turn around and walk away. But Moxie was missing, seemingly a victim of whatever had killed and impersonated the YouTuber Operike. And I couldn't abandon her to whatever fate that thing had in store. She was still alive, I knew it. If the thing had wanted her dead, it would have killed her like it did Miss Cranston and Operike himself. Their bodies were left for the world to find. There was no reason to physically take Moxie except to use as bait. And every fisherman knows live bait is the best bait. There were several trails leading into the park. I picked one at random and made my way in. No wind rustled the trees. No animals moved through the brush. There were no insects chirping or doves cooing. No tapping of a woodpecker's beak on the bark of trees. And no bubbling of any nearby streams. Ever since I started Mielke investigations, I'd been developing a sense for knowing when I was in the presence of something supernatural. It started in the basement of the strip club during our first case, when I felt a presence in the dark rather than saw it. And it happened again during this case after Miss Cranston's diary found its way to my motel room, and something unseen followed it in. And now I had the feeling again. Something was in Noonan Park, shadowing my every step. In my experience, it was best not to acknowledge malevolent entities unless they acknowledged you first. so I remained silent. A part of me never really believed there was a house in these woods. The park was too small. Someone would have seen it by now. So, when I saw the 2-story building of greystone, I was surprised. It was somewhat hidden. It was surrounded on all sides by trees, and there was more vine-covered area than not. But I still found it hard to believe no park official had ever noticed. Perhaps it was old enough to have been there before the woods became state land. I had to hurry if I was going to explore the house. It was starting to get dark, and I didn't bring a flashlight. Because why would I? It was early when I arrived. I pulled out my phone and checked the time. I'd been wandering a 150-acre park for over 8 hours. Behind me, something laughed. I didn't hear it. I was probably violating a few laws by breaking in, even if the place was abandoned. The door to the house was locked, but it was also made of old, rotting wood. One good shove forced it open. A rush of air from inside swept over me. It smelled and tasted stale, of course, but there was something else mixed with the old air. A faint whiff of odour that reminded me of the rancid smell of a recycling plant. I stepped inside, leaving the door open to let some light in. The place was filthy and cobwebs covered everything I saw. The ground was littered with the corpses of many thousands of insects and arachnids. There were also bones scattered here and there that looked to belong to rodents and birds. A few were big enough to belong to a raccoon or an opossum. There were footsteps on the ceiling. The feeling that there was something unnatural near me was stronger than ever. Whatever resided here was responsible for the deaths of at least 2 people. I had to tread carefully. I had nothing on me to serve as a weapon, and even if I did, I doubted anything physical could hurt the entity I was hunting. Even so, I went outside and picked up a hefty rock. It might have been useless for protection, but it made me feel better anyway. I took the stairs one at a time, and they thankfully seemed to be less rotted than the door. There were a multitude of rooms on the top floor, and sounds were coming from one of them. I looked inside and the muttering stopped. The figure standing in the empty room turned to look at me. I dropped the rock and ran to her, pulling her into a bear hug. Moxie responded by wrapping her own arms around me, but she did it slowly.
Jacob, where am I? Is this where we're meeting for coffee?
Her words were slurred, and her eyes didn't focus on me when I pulled out of the hug to look at her. What do you remember? She looked around the room, as if she might find her thoughts scattered about.
I was on the computer, and I got up to use the bathroom, or get something to eat, or something. I was looking for something, and I got lost. I just kept walking until I ran into you. But that doesn't make any sense, does it? Where are we?
It doesn't matter right now. Let's get out of this place. I'll tell you everything outside. She nodded a few seconds longer than necessary and moved toward the door. I blinked and everything changed. Moxie was gone, the door was shut, and the only illumination came from the moonlight streaming in through the window. I froze as my mind tried to make sense of what just happened. It was still light out a moment ago. All I did was blink.
Alone at last.
The voice came from within the room, but I couldn't see the source. I so badly wanted to panic, but I knew if I did, that was it for me. So I concentrated on my breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth, slow and deliberate.
I've been watching you for a long time, Jacob. I've studied you far longer than
Don't engage it. Leave the room. Get moving. Don't engage it. Don't engage it. Don't engage it.
I know you have questions. Ask them. You've crossed hundreds of miles to see me. Now's your chance to learn. I'll tell you everything if you just ask. Do you want to know my secret?
What are you? Shit. I engaged it. I'm an abstract. I live off of stories.
The boy who found me was a good storyteller, and his stories attracted thousands on his video channel. Their attention fed me well, but I want more. I want what your stories can give me. Above everything else, I want you.
You can't have me, but if you let me go, and Moxie too, I'll give you stories. I'll share them with everyone. I'll tell the whole world about you. Will that be enough for you? There was silence for a moment. Then,
For now, yes. But sooner or later you'll give yourself to me. You're not ready yet, but you can't resist forever. You're like me. You love the stories. You need to know.
I know your secret name. Will you let me and Moxie go in exchange for the story?
Write the story, and all will be well. For now.
Great. I willed my feet to move and left the room. I took the stairs two at a time, and right as I reached the house's front door, the voice spoke again.
You're wrong about one thing. You don't know my secret. Not yet. But I'm not going anywhere. I'll be watching you. Always. When you're ready to know, just ask.
Moxie was waiting for me when I left the house. She sat on the ground near a boulder, arms wrapped around herself, shivering. She didn't look at me as I approached, but spoke softly when I helped her to her feet.
You were gone a long time. Where did you go? Where did I go?
I took her by the arm and led her along the path. Everything's gonna be okay, I promise. Moxie came out of a delirium on the bus ride back to Milwaukee. I recounted the whole story to her, how a strange entity came here from another world seeking stories and storytellers. I explained how it latched onto Operike, killing him and using his YouTube channel to feed on the attention. I told Moxie how it had kidnapped her to lure me in, believing I would be a better source of stories than Operike, and the deal I'd made with it in exchange for our safety. She didn't say much after that. A couple of the other bus passengers urged me to seek psychiatric help though. When we got back to Milwaukee, Moxie told me she needed some time away from me and the investigative service we'd started together. I worried that was the end of our friendship. I couldn't blame her if it was. I wrote down everything that happened, at least everything I was willing to share with you readers, and saved it in my case number 2 folder on my laptop. I'd keep up my end of the bargain with the entity and share the story with the world someday. I'd share all of them, but it wasn't time yet. I didn't think it'd mind waiting. After all, what sense of time does an abstract being have? I needed to work on more cases, enough to keep the stories coming for a long time. God only knows what it would do to me if I ran out of tales to tell. I continued to work on cases and record stories over the months and years to come. I still do to this day, and I'm finally sharing them with you, dear readers. Now you know my reasons weren't entirely selfish. I can't say I mind much. I wouldn't be in this line of work if I wasn't drawn to the supernatural and the tales they tell me. In some way the entity was right. I am just like it, snapping up stories and sharing them with the world. I thrive on stories, and I'm happiest when I'm telling them. The entity mostly leaves me alone. No one else has been threatened or attacked because of me. Oh, every once in a while it'll do something to make its presence known. It's just reminding me that it's always there, always watching, waiting for me to share our story. And sometimes, not often, I'll wake up in the middle of the night, in a cold sweat, and a voice will whisper to me.
Do you want to know